to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a public hearing that was scheduled for this evening, and we're going to start that public hearing this evening, but we're going to have to do sort of a general presentation and then hold, because we found we needed to give a different level of notice for this public hearing. Then we had made a little error here. So we're going to open the public hearing and on the zoning district amendment 02024-0022ZC. And Mr. Dunn, our planning director, will review this with us, and we will then provide opportunity for anyone who wants to comment today on that request. And then we will be recessing this hearing until May 7th, when there'll be another opportunity for the public to comment on this zoning request change. So, Mr. Dunn.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Dave Dunn, Olmsted County Planning and Housing Director. We have a zone change in front of you tonight, and what we're going to ask for you all to do is to continue this item until the next meeting. As the chairperson had stated, that we had an error in our notification, and we did not notify all of the people that should have gotten a notice for tonight's public hearing. But what we would ask you to do is to open the public hearing. If anyone is here tonight that would like to speak, they're more than welcome to do so, and then continue the public hearing. We will do our formal presentation in a couple of weeks, but we want to make sure that anyone who is here tonight has a chance to be heard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here this evening who is here for the public hearing on this zoning change that would like to speak? Is there anyone here who wants to speak? We always say it 3 times at a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience or online who would like to speak? Use the public hearing time for the zoning district amendment that we have before us. And my third call.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I believe a proper motion is to recess the public hearing until May 7th.
Don't we have to close and then we can vote to continue? Okay, I'll make a motion to continue the meeting till May 7th.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to continue the public hearing on May 7th, to table the public hearing and continue on May 7th. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The motion prevails. Move to our consent agenda. And there's only 3 items on our consent agenda. One is to proclaim May 5th through 11th as Correctional Officers Week. And I'm looking to see if the sheriff is in the room or any of our correctional officers. There he is. And some of our correctional officers, which is really from our Adult Detention Center. We congratulate you and thank you for your service to the community. And we don't know what all you're going to be doing to celebrate Correctional Officers Week, but we will, I'm sure, be proclaiming it as the consent agenda moves forward. We also want to approve the April 2nd, 2024 County Board meeting minutes. And the third item is to accept quotes and the bid for the season supply of services and materials to maintain county roads.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The motion prevails. And now we have a discussion and a celebration. And Ms. Ziegler is going to open this conversation for us. We are going to be pleased and proud to accept a donation from Friends of Oxbow, a very substantial donation for the Nature Center. So, Ms. Carlin.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Carlin Ziegler, the Olmsted County Parks Director. Once again, I get to stand in front of you with great news. I often get that privilege to give you the good news. And it's not just that the Nature Center is complete, but that we have a fantastic friends group behind this project who really help push us along, promote it to the community, and really generate some excitement around this project. So they set a very lofty goal for themselves. Previous to this project, they had raised about $1 million over the course of many years. And so the fact that they set themselves a goal of $1 million was huge to begin with. But I, myself, Lonnie, the rest of the staff, we all had a huge amount of faith in them that they could do this. We encouraged them, and they by far produced. They hit the ground running. They were fantastic at it. They reached out to different avenues versus with grants, with large organizations, with private donations. They just really did a lot of brainstorming, thinking outside the box, pulling in other people for help, and really realizing that goal. And so I think it's just fantastic that they were able to reach that goal, and I think it's just worth the celebration and the thanks from you that we want to provide to them, because they really definitely need to be recognized for this. It was a huge accomplishment. So I appreciate all the work they did. It made my load a little lighter as well. So I thank you very, very much to
I'd
the
like to
board.
invite them, the Friends
Yes,
of
please come up.
Oxbow Park. Would you please come up so we
All of
can
you board members,
recognize you?
Come on up.
I'm sure there's a few more of you. All right. I have a list of who we were expecting, but things do change, so. I don't know if you're going to get a chance to see the cake before it's cut, but if you were, you would see your portraits are on it. So,
We were able to get a picture of it before it was cut.
oh,
so-
good. All right. I'll maybe get a picture of all of you too. I'm sure that I'm not the only one on the county board who wishes to express sincere thanks to you and gratitude for the very strong volunteer effort you've consistently put in for Oxbow Park. You do all sorts of wonderful things there, and this effort that you made to raise money for the new nature center was exceptional, and we just really wanted to take a chance to thank you in person. But let me start by inviting you to introduce yourselves, and then I'm going to invite my colleagues, who I am quite certain several of them want to express their appreciation to you directly as well. So, would you like to start?
Good evening. I'm Sean Buckwalter, current president of Friends of Oxbow. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Sean.
I'm Danielle, oh, sorry, go ahead. I think I'm loud enough. I'm Danielle Sterling. I am a board member and I work with the volunteers.
Thank you.
I'm Deb Hansen, secretary.
Good
Tammy
for
Hansen, one of my
television.
board members. Oh, Patty Peterson, I work with the Zoo Dazzle.
Sarah Lasla, I'm also helping with the Zoo Dazzle. Patty? Jolene Hines, Communications.
Lou Coolman, treasurer.
Right. All right.
We do have a few missing. Chris, I should say Nelson, Jan Nelson, and Dawn Thompson.
All right.
And Lori Durst.
Well, we're very grateful, and I invite my colleagues, if anyone wishes to speak. I'm sure Commissioner Wright is ready.
Thank you very much. I got a green light here. Thank you very much. Yeah, as a member of the board, I've been on the park board for many years, so I followed the volunteers and the progress that went on at Oxbow as well as the rest of the parks. But I think what's impressive is that to raise $1 million, I thought there would be like 1,000 people here. And here we have a very small group of very committed people that shows that when you get your mind to put your mind at something, that you can really make a change, and $1 million is a lot of money. So I thank you on my part, and I'm sure the rest of the board will thank you as well. But this is an amazing feat. And now that you've rested, I just wanted to know when the next million is going to come in. Very much.
Commissioner Rossman.
Yes. I would just echo the sentiments of gratitude. I mean, what a tremendous feat for a small group of people. This nature center truly is a regional gem, not just for the residents of Olmsted County. We pull people in from all over the region, and generations will continue to benefit from that tremendous resource that we have now in Olmsted County that we couldn't have done without you, and the tremendous programming and events that you put on there. Thank you so much for what you've done for us in this county and the Nature Center.
Commissioner Tyne.
I was on the board when we made the decision to move forward with this, and we used your math. We counted on that $1 million when we were deciding to move forward, so I really appreciate you being true to your word. So, thank you.
We took the risk of a more elaborate nature center, and we're very grateful for you that you made that a reality. So thank you. Anyone else care to speak? Commissioner Senchum.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you. I still consider myself new to this board, so I'm sort of a Johnny-come-lately on this, although we certainly worked on it legislatively in St. Paul. But I just look at you, and I was thinking a few minutes ago, $1 million, and it's been stressed, but I don't think there's been a endeavor like this in at least my memory, short of Mayo Foundation, that's not even fair comparison, but for people to come together and raise $1 million, I think you lead the pack in fact with respect to the history of our community, and I talk about the greater community here. Thank you so much. You've left a legacy, and you've certainly left a facility out there that people are going to enjoy for years to come, and it's all right there on your shoulders. So thank you so much for what you've done.
Very much. Well,
And Madam
I
Chair.
believe that.
There it is.
I would like to make it official.
Oh, we would love to, but let's let Commissioner Podolsky-Smith speak first, and then we would gladly take a check for $1 million. I've never seen a check for $1 million.
Board and a check. But just quickly, there are so many ways that this $1 million will fund and support and enrich the Nature Center and the Zolman Zoo, and one thing that it will surely do is it will create so much joy throughout the community. So just congratulations on the joy that you must know that you're creating in the visitors. And I know 2 little girls in the audience who are especially joyful about the Zolman Zoo and the Oxbow Nature Center. So just thank you so much.
Yeah, really.
Well, are we going to do an official presentation? Is that what you would like to do? And I'm looking to our staff to see, usually they want to take photos when something like this happens, so, and they usually want to tell us where to stand. So, usually I think the chair accepts donations. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this, so.
Yes. See?
Staff, do you want to take photos, and do you want us to do it just here? Okay, Ms. Welsh is coming to take a photo, and if you'd like to, are you going to get to Carlin?
I want to take a photo of $1 million check.
All right.
And deposit it.
It probably really is more appropriate for you to take it. So let's get to the photo opportunity as well. So with all of this wonderful crowd, if you turn that way, Miss Welsh will get your photo, and you would need to, yeah, okay, great. All of you. All right, there we go.
There we go.
We're a little informal, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Carlin, let me see it.
See a check for $1 million.
All right. Thank you very much.
Amazing.
Did you get
That is
Carlin?
so
Yes.
amazing.
All right. So, gentlemen, I'm declaring a recess of the county board and inviting all of you to join us in celebrating this accomplishment for Oxbow Park. I would note that we have guests that we usually don't have with us today. We also have our corrections officers here that we're celebrating a little bit with you as well. We didn't have you on the agenda to speak, but if you really want to, we may be able to accommodate you. And then please come over for cake and refreshments. Everyone in the audience is invited. And I see a little girl in pink who's really happy about that. So, join us.
Madam Chair, before you, we technically need to just simply, I realize it's just a technicality, but they need to vote to accept the donation. And there's a resolution in the packet. So
All right, thank
you just
you,
approve the
Mr.
resolution. I think we've
May I
taken
have
care
a
of it.
motion?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the check from the Friends of Oxbow Park for the Oxbow Nature Center. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, same sign. The motion prevails, and thank you, Mr. Canan. Medical examiner's report, we serve cake. But I would note that the medical examiner refused cake, so I think maybe next year we invite him when we're not serving cake. Anyway, welcome. We're here, our next item on our agenda is to hear the medical examiner's report, and welcome to the podium.
I just didn't want to fade. It's my sugar drop mid-presentation. Yes, I like this tradition, though. So thank you, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. My name is Ross Reichert. I'm the Olmsted County Medical Examiner and the Chief Medical Examiner for the Southern Minnesota Regional Medical Examiner's Office, and I'll be doing our annual presentation today. And so just as a brief reminder, this is the dark blue area is the jurisdiction that we cover. The lighter blue areas are the consult counties. And so these are the counties that we do autopsies for, but don't provide complete death investigation. And it's quite nice to cover this region because we have counties in the southeastern quadrant or corner of Minnesota to compare the data against. And you'll see that as we go through today. So this is our staff. We're up to 4 pathologists. Andrew Wayman, Assistant Chief, is an MD. He's one of our newest forensic pathologists. He did cardiovascular pathology and forensic pathology, so we have a great team. It's kind of hard to believe that we have 4 forensic pathologists here. I have my assistant and colleague, Monica Kindle, here, who's in charge of our death investigator. She's really the person that runs everything for us and coordinates it, I'll be honest. Like, she's an amazing person that does a lot for our whole office. And then we have our death investigators that cover Olmsted County. We're very fortunate that all of these are pathologist assistants, so we really have like the highest level of training for death investigators of anywhere in the country. And then we have our Office of Decedent Affairs and our reporting specialists, and this is really our administrative support that helps us put together a presentation such as this and coordinate the logistics of things. So just starting with a high-level summary. So this is the population of the county currently. This is the total number of deaths. You have the total number of cases that were reported to us. So it's 1,937. We did 211 complete autopsies. We did some external examinations, and so these were cases where we could just review the external findings on an individual, and some we could certify the deaths without doing an examination because we have complete medical records that would explain, why they would fall under our jurisdiction, such as an injury that's been well documented in the hospital, so we wouldn't need to do that. Then we had 1,416 that we had initially reviewed and released our jurisdiction back, but we're always thankful to have something reported to us. We'd much rather have it reported to us and decline our jurisdiction than have something, come up days, weeks, months after the fact. But if you take all the ways that we contact the different fatalities that are occurring, so this is through hospice and cremation permits that we approve, we're in some way involved in reviewing 85% of the deaths go through our office in some way, shape, or form. So I find that reassuring from my standpoint that our eyes are being laid on these and making sure things are, going on the up and up. So the next is just a brief reminder of the death certificate information. Again, it's hard to believe how much we've talked about death certificates in the public setting over the last number of years. So the cause of death, the underlying reason why they died, the manner of death, which is about the circumstances. We'll talk about that in more detail: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, and undetermined. Then there's a bunch of other public health data that's gathered. Were they injured at work? Is this transportation related? Were they pregnant at the time? Smoking or tobacco use related to it? And then obviously the families use this for closure, but also for lots of other sort of legal things that they're managing. And then it rolls up to the Minnesota Department of Health and ultimately to the CDC. So it's kind of an interesting connection where we start with our investigators at the scene, figuring out if we need to be involved, which ultimately will drive whether we have an autopsy, the death certificate information, and how that really flows up to the national level. So I think it's a pretty neat example of the connection between really local, activities to the national level and how that works. Okay, so we're gonna go through a variety of different slides here. So this is the manner of death, and so this is based on the county of death. So there'll be two different sort of graphs will be showing. So one is where the county of death where the death occurred, and the second one is where the injury occurred, and that's important particularly for some place like Olmsted County where people were being transported here, and so the injury occurred outside the county, but they were transported here and died in the county. So these are ones that died in the county. You can see the vast majority were natural, followed by accident. We did have 5 undetermined. These are typically there's a range of findings, and so they can often are like decomposed individuals or people that are hard to get information to determine the actual cause of death. Another example would be someone that had remote traumatic brain injury, but it can happen many, many decades ago, and so we don't know, did someone assault them? Did they fall? Did they do something to hurt themselves? And so sometimes when there's a long delay, we can't get back to that original source of information. Deaths by unnatural causes. So we've now just taken out the natural deaths, as I've highlighted a number of times here. Falls or jumps, which is really just predominantly falls, or typically in the elderly population, and so that's really what's driving that number. It surprises some people how many fall-related deaths that we have. But the mortality of someone who has a long bone fracture from a fall that's elderly is quite high. So it's like 50% likelihood of death in the next year to 2 years, depending on the data that you see. And then we have our accidental drug overdoses, which are down from 76 to 49 this year. And so we'll explore that a little bit more as we go through the data. And then we have miscellaneous other items in here that we can talk about. This is suicide by means. Individuals typically commit suicide by using what's convenient to them. So firearms is not unexpected, followed by ligature hangings. And we do have some 2 drug overdoses and one that was a sharp force injury and an asphyxia-related death. So. Suicide by age. Again, this is something we've started tracking over the last few years, and what we see in our population is in that 26 to 64 population is really the driver of the suicides. We fortunately don't see too many in the lower age brackets, but that's definitely something that we are keeping an eye on for a lot of reasons, obviously. This is the suicide rate per capita. So we're dealing with relatively small numbers here, but you can see that the red bar is the state average, and this is based on the county of injury. I should point that out. So the other ones were in the county of death. Now we've switched over to the county of injury, and you can see where Olmsted fell with 18 per 100,000. Homicides, and so 2023, we had 2 homicides, one in the other category, and one and this is by county of death. So we had a blunt trauma, firearms, and a other miscellaneous one. Again, so this is where they died. So these are the ones that died in Olmsted County. It's not the ones that occurred in Olmsted County. Homicide rate per 100,000. Again, our numbers are relatively low, so there were 2 homicides in Olmsted County in 2023. So that was in contrast to the previous item that showed all the deaths that occurred that were homicides that had occurred outside and within the county. That's why the numbers are different. Accidental deaths by type. So again, fall, we had as the leading cause, followed by drug overdoses, which is still significantly ahead of motor vehicle accidents, which is historically was a big shift about 13 or 14 years ago. We had 2 drownings, one in a house fire. The asphyxia or choking, 6 of those were choking related. So this is someone choking on their food. Accident death by vehicle crashes, and so this is the county of death. So again, individuals that were injured outside of the county and transported here would also be counted here. 14 SUVs, and then we had 3 motorcycle, 2 pedestrian, and 5 others. In some of the other counties that we cover, quite a few of our motorcycle fatalities are related to individuals striking deer. It was almost all of our motorcycle fatalities last year were from people striking deer. Just for your information. The other, that's a mixture of ATVs, UTVs, and which is 4 and 1 electric scooter. So this is the type of vehicle in the location. And so it's, there was in 2023, there were 8 motor vehicle accidents in Olmsted County. And so you can see where the location of these accidents occurred based on the type of vehicle that was being used. It's kind of amazing to look at the numbers, to be honest. We had 3 2-car accidents, 2 single-car accidents, 1 motorcycle, 1 snowplow related to a pedestrian, and 1 train. So it's a really, for a county of this size, it's pretty striking the low number of motor vehicle accidents. So that's, from my perspective, a positive. I think a lot about the roads. There's been a lot of changes in the 12 years that I've been here to the roads and spaces around here. I mean, I will just say there's intersections that Monica and I would have or very avoided or cautiously approached that now have roundabouts in rural areas that have really changed our perspective of what's happened. So I just like to commend you all for that type of work that you've done to improve the safety. These are legitimately things that we truly think about as we drive.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, there's one I drive through somewhat regularly that I mentioned to my wife how much safer this is now. But anyhow, so we'll move on to the next slide. And so this is just laying over the year fatalities, so you can see the different colors. Trying to see if there is a particular spot that there seems to be a cluster of fatalities occurring, and so the larger the dot, the greater number of fatalities. I would say I'd have to double check on this, but typically the larger numbers is because there's often like multiple fatalities in one. And like if there's like a 2019, this large red dot probably reflects multiple fatalities in that single motor vehicle accident. But we have that if people want to explore it more. So this is the motor vehicle fatality rate per capita. So again, we're dealing with relatively small numbers. And so again, if you have multiple fatalities in one case or one accident, it can really change that. And you can see where Olmsted County falls below the state line. And this is by the county of injury. So these are the ones that occurred in those specific counties. So it's sorting that out. Accidental deaths by falls. Again, you can see how it's affecting our older population, and we fortunately keep adding age brackets to this. So, it was just greater than 65, and now we're up to 95 plus. But again, as you age, the likelihood of having significant complications from a fall, whether from hitting your head or breaking a bone, dramatically increase. So where do these injuries occur? So this is something that at the request we've added, and so you can see the decedent's residence is the largest number. It's interesting to note that then at the assisted living facility, it drops from 35 to 27 in the assisted facility, and then down to 17 in the care facility. We haven't corrected for like the sheer number of individuals, but at least at a very gross level, it would sort of imply that maybe the numbers are lower as if people are getting increased care. But again, you'd have to, adjust that for the population and in those respective groups. Deaths related to poisonings and drugs. And so you can see it's dramatically down for illegal drugs from 2022 to 2023. if you, and that also includes 2 suicides are in there and 1 homicide. I think it's kind of interesting looking at the data now. So sort of the pre-pandemic in 2019, we're at 14, and then we have these 3 years that really went up, and now we're going back down. So maybe we're going back to being on somewhat of a similar trajectory that we would have been on if we hadn't had that major stepping on the gas in between, because the drug overdoses were going down before the pandemic, and so maybe that'll continue. We have 4 mixed drugs, 2 with alcohol, 10 with prescription medications, and we'll dive into that in a little bit more detail.
Does that trend around illegal drugs, are you seeing that in other counties as well?
I think we have seen that around. Yeah, we have seen
Just
that
generally.
Yeah, it's been pretty consistent. So last year was really the bad year. That was where it really peaked across the various counties. And I can hypothesize, but when we looked at individual cases to try to understand what was happening, it was in older individuals that were often chronic drug users. And so these were like long-term drug users, and they were typically found deceased in their residence, and they inevitably had fentanyl on board. So these are individuals that are, comfortable using drugs and have been doing it for many years, and then are basically found dead at home. So no one's had a chance to call law enforcement or EMS and administer Narcan and so forth. So I think that was really sort of a driver of the bump of that. So even more potent fentanyl was in everything. Accidental drug deaths by age, and it's really in this 26 to 64 age group, and that's pretty consistent across all the counties. It's not like classically people sort of think of like that 20-year-old, 18-year-old kind of drug overdose, but this is in an aging population. And I mean, it's amazing. I just signed a death certificate yesterday of someone who was 67 that had methamphetamine and cocaine on board. And so it's amazing as the population ages and people are using illicit drugs. I mean, it seems to be a trend at least. Drug overdose per capita, and so this is by county of injury. And so in Olmsted County, there were 38 accidental, 2 suicides, and 1 homicide, and you can see we're slightly above the state average, but you can see where we fall across the southeast. And again, somewhat small numbers when you compare it to the other counties that, their numbers can shift pretty dramatically for this rate if they go from 1 to 4, for example. So illicit drugs by category, I think, it's really nice to see this trend down. But I think the take-home message still is that 22 of these had fentanyl as a component of it. And so although things have decreased, that still seems to be the thread that pulls things together. That just kind of takes it to another level. We still continue to see the mixed drugs or occasionally the pure fentanyl. And so the fentanyl concentrations that we see continue to climb. So when we test postmortem blood, these are pretty high, like extraordinarily high concentrations. I mean, just as an example, when we first started seeing fentanyl overdoses, which have occurred sporadically for many years, and people were abusing prescription forms of fentanyl, I might sign a death certificate that would have like 3 or 5 nanograms per milliliter of fentanyl. Now it's pretty routine, like 15, 20, 30, 40. I mean, this is like anesthesia level of fentanyl that people have, and they've survived long enough to metabolize it. So I think it speaks to what their tolerance is for opioids. So I find it staggering to be quite honest. Deaths by natural causes. Cancer and heart disease are still the leading causes of death, and we see that across the country. Neurologic disorders is still up there as well. Pulmonary deaths have decreased, and so the idea is that was a reflection of COVID and lung disease. One thing that we're going to look into in more detail is like the liver disease, because we have seen reports in the literature of increased liver and alcohol-related deaths coming out of the pandemic. And so we're going to start to explore that a little bit more going forward. Deaths by age group, you know, the take-home message here is the farther this is shifted to the right, the better, because that's the older population. Getting older is riskier, you know, it's, you know, it's not for the faint of heart, as they say. But that's really what you want to see, because people are dying of natural diseases. When you see those peaks in the lower age brackets, that tells you people are dying of non-natural deaths. And so I think it's just important to realize that that's dramatically shifted to the right, which is great, because that's reflecting natural life expectancies. And so these are our activities. And so it's kind of interesting because we've seen a decrease in some of our activities, from investigations to the number of autopsies and our scenes and so forth. And again, if you look back to 2019, it looks like, you know, there's like sort of a bump in this, and maybe we're sort of getting back to what the trajectory might have been on a more natural path. We've seen this just on our autopsy service in general. That might have been, you know, what would be the natural growth over time, just because we're, you know, we're driven by what really the population versus sort of this aberrant 3 years in here. So yes, my staff's like, wow, we feel like it's so slow and not that busy. And it's like, well, we are busier than we were in 2019. It just happened to be not quite as crazy as it has been for the last few years. But I think now that we have some hindsight, we're starting to potentially be able to you know, see what the effects of the pandemic and all the things that came with it. So with that, I think that concludes it, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Right.
Yeah. Dr. Reichert, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's always very interesting. I noticed the deaths are down in almost every category except for falls among 85-year-olds.
Yes.
And I also noticed that deaths due to falls are about 2.5 times greater than the deaths that are due to overdoses of drugs.
Yes.
But we're spending a ton of money on reducing the number of people that overdose than we are compared to preventing falls. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but I noticed that or not. And you would think that if we were going to put our money where the best thing is, that we would probably try to prevent falls. That's maybe an observation, I don't know.
Well, so I can comment on falls. And so falls are extremely complicated. Like, so this is something the hospitals continuously are challenged by, because how do you prevent a fall, right? And so, like, how do you have somebody who's like there's a lot of work being done on this, and like, you know, people are starting to even take like AI models and look at this, because it's sort of like, how can you predict when someone's going to likely have a fall? You know, is it because, you know, it's this time of day? Is it because, like, you know, someone was supposed to be in the room and help them to the bathroom, and they were short staffed, so they were like 30 minutes late? It happened to be they were delirious, you know. And so I think to predict and try to prevent those is extremely complicated.
I appreciate that, but you've also pointed out that most of those falls take place at home, not in a hospital, not in an assisted care facility.
Right.
And we already do have the technology and the knowledge of what we need to make homes safer, so that we probably could prevent that. But I don't want to run the debate here on how we're going to do all that. But I do think it's interesting, and your statistics point out that maybe we should look at that a little bit more carefully. But I have some other questions for you. The state of Minnesota is considering a bill that would allow people that are terminally ill to assist them into choosing when they want to die, rather than let the disease take a course. Would that still be regarded as a suicide, or would that be regarded as an intentional death? And how would the examiner report that?
So that's a good question. And so the way other states have handled this, like Vermont and Oregon and so forth, is you basically cut the medical examiner completely out of this whole process. And so the way the statutes are written is by statute, the death certificate has to be written as the cause of death is the underlying disease that they have, and the manner of death or the circumstances will be natural because they died of their natural diseases. That's the argument. And by law, then whoever signs that death certificate would have to put natural as a manner of death. You can imagine as a forensic pathologist, as a medical examiner, that we know that doesn't reflect what actually happened. And no judgment on my part, but that's not what, from a pathophysiologic standpoint, occurred. And so this would be out of our jurisdiction, and we've worked to make sure that the medical examiner or even coroners are like, we would not be part of this at all. This would be the responsibility of that primary care physician to sign the death certificate, and then states keep a log of how many of these deaths, these so-called assisted suicide or deaths in these scenarios would be, they would be tracked in a completely different system. And the laws related to how long that data and information related to those deaths is, again, completely separate than what we would do. So we would fall outside of it. So to your point, we would classify these as suicide if someone, took their own life regardless if they had a terminal illness or not. But those deaths would not be reflected in our medical examiner data because by law they would no longer be medical examiner cases.
Sure. Well, because I only ask that because it is a little bit different because of the end of life and somebody not wanting to go through the pain of all that stuff. And suicide carries with it some negative connotations that maybe is not fair to characterize for somebody that's in that terminal situation. How many deaths were caused by cannabis?
0.
Thank you. I ask that every year. And
I know, I'm consistent.
Yeah.
I'm very consistent. We can talk about how it doesn't bind to the receptors in your brain stem and cause respiratory.
Very important.
Yes.
All right. And then also the liver. Now, it's really interesting that you're talking about the liver, but is there an association between prescription drugs, such as Oxycontin or some of these other drugs that are associated with the liver issues, in addition to maybe alcohol?
I don't know that offhand. I mean, obviously there are prescription drugs that have toxic effects on the liver. I mean, what we've seen is just the increased reports on increased alcohol-related deaths. And so we're just going to take a deeper dive into that and see if we can, so what we'll do is we'll go back and look at our chronic alcoholism deaths and then see how that sort of parallels what the liver-related deaths are.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner?
Thank you, Dr. Reichard. If you would please go back to just a couple slides to death by age group.
Sure.
So
Actually,
thank you for this fascinating and important, if a bit grim, presentation. I'm so curious, what is so magical about turning age 95? Because once you turn 95, your likelihood of death drops dramatically.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me see if I can find the.
Like if you turn 95, you're golden for a while.
Yep. That's my goal.
That's your goal? Yes. I think, so that's the number of deaths. So that's the volume. That's
Not a percentage.
So you've outlasted your friends.
Yeah.
Because what we have is the number of deaths, so that's the volume of deaths. And so what you see is that population is starting to decrease.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So there's fewer deaths in that age group because there's fewer in that age group.
So Commissioner White will be the only guy at the nursing home at that point.
Are there other questions, Commissioner?
Yeah, and so that's what that's reflecting. And eventually we'll probably have to add over that. I mean, if we still had a robust population of nuns at Assisi Heights, we would definitely be well into the greater than 100 age group. I mean, it's phenomenal.
Yep.
Would you go to the chart that, it wasn't a chart, it was like the deaths associated with fentanyl?
Yes, I think
It wasn't a bar graph, but I wanted to ask about, with, the sheriff is here too, if we really look at the number of deaths, you know, you've got fentanyl alone, but fentanyl and cocaine with heroin, with meth, with others, and yet I'm just wondering about that association. I mean, I think we consistently hear that fentanyl is increasingly available. We're, you know, trying to stem the flow. And then we sort of combine that with a report we had in Human Services Committee this morning about our opioid response team. I don't know. I'm not being very explicit here, but
So,
what conclusions do you draw when you look at the illicit drugs by category and based on county of injury? You know,
I mean,
deaths?
what I see is that the fentanyl is the thread through it, and you're going to have different drug users that maybe have preferences for different drugs that they want to use, or they might just be getting different drugs. And so, you know, the combination of fentanyl with meth is definitely something that's increased over the years. There's, you know, is it like the new, because when you combine different drugs, sometimes it gives individuals different highs, and so they seek out specific drugs. Like cocaine, for example, has a veterinary medicine that's a contaminant in it now that it's been that way for years, but it provides a different sort of high that cocaine users have sought out. And for some people, it will destroy their bone marrow. We were part of when I was in New Mexico, this was part of something that was initially written up because this drug user came in and all of his bone marrow was basically dead. He recovered and then he went back to the same drug user because he liked that high. And based on his genotype, it wiped out his bone marrow again. But they're specifically seeking out that sort of that mixture. And so I don't know if that's what it is, or people are also sometimes using whatever they can get on. They're using it for some of these very hardcore drug users, like whatever they can get their hands on is what they'll take. But I think the thread there is still the fentanyl and the lethality with it. There's a very narrow margin for error in that.
So Commissioner Wright facetiously asked you about death by cannabis, but doesn't
No, that was not facetious. That was an actual question of fact. I wanted to
excuse me.
establish that nobody dies from marijuana.
Excuse me, I was asking a question. Do you anticipate that cannabis, as it becomes legal, will be a factor in some accidental deaths or in depression, or do you anticipate anything?
So there are some scenarios where you can have bad outcomes from it. What typically has happened is people it's rare cases, but you'll have people that inadvertently, this was before the edibles were better labeled, where people would think they were like eating a candy bar and they've taken a huge dose of THC and they've had sort of like psychotic type of breaks and done something where they have a traumatic death. It's not directly related to the cannabis. There's something where you can get extreme vomiting from cannabis, and so it's relatively well known out there, so people know how to manage it, but that's something that people can get sick, and rarely you'll hear of like a college kid or something that dies from that complication.
It could be also falls or car accidents or other things.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, there's other things that would not be part of the cause of death, but would be part of the death investigation, and so that's why we report like what's that whole panel, that it will include that for all of our deaths, even if it's like a motor vehicle accident where the cause of death wasn't directly related to them being impaired, but it clearly was important for the investigation to understand.
So one more question: as if you were in our seats, what would you take away from your report that you think we should pay close attention to this?
I think I would probably take away three things: is like looking at what the pre-pandemic numbers are versus what they were last year and where the trends go, particularly as you see a county that's growing. And so like putting into that factor, I would think about like an aging population and how you manage that. And then I think fentanyl still has to be up there on the top of the list of folks. I mean, what's not seen behind these numbers are some of the really tragic cases where you see the 14-year-old that thinks they got a Percocet from a friend and they take this pill and it was pure fentanyl. You know, those are pretty heartbreaking scenarios, but it's a dangerous game. So that would be probably my 3, and probably the 4th one would be the takeaway of like motor vehicle accidents have decreased. So with increased, better safety of cars, better roads, better attention to that, that's really made a huge difference. And I think even with the focus on better education and reporting on like related to ATVs and UTVs and wearing seatbelts and helmets has also decreased that. I mean, you know, those have really gone down. It's come a long way from those 3-wheelers where it was like the big one in the front and 2 in the back where you hit a bump and it flips over and lands on you. So I think that those are the incremental changes that are preventable deaths and injuries, which is, I think, a testament to like what public health is doing and how it affects these kind of trajectories.
Thank you. Senator, excuse me, I always do that. Commissioner Senator.
Thank you, Senator Cascade. Just a couple of questions, and this might not be in your wheelhouse or not, but so you have a multi-county jurisdiction, and we're getting off the death thing, but just financially, how does that work? Does each county kind of pay into a pool and you?
So we have a contract with each county, and there's
Okay.
a per capita rate based on the population.
Okay.
So the counties they're all paying the same rate per person. And then we provide the complete death investigation, all the autopsies and everything that goes with it for that rate.
And the other one, Madam Chair, it might more relate to Ms. Kendall, I don't know, but I just sort of curious, and I hearken back to Dr. Balo and listening to some of his exploits. He was sort of a one-person program, but but nonetheless, he had a life experience. But so as it is now, for instance, is if there is I'll just call it a suspicious death someplace in our area, I suspect, well, then what happens? Is it the local law enforcement that calls you out, and do you go red lights and sirens, or how does this all work?
How does it roll out?
With respect to your relationship with law enforcement, your criminal apprehension, and so on.
Yeah, so the way it works is, so someone calls 911, there's a death, then they call dispatch, and then we have death investigators in every county. And so then they respond as promptly as possible to get to that death. And then they do an independent investigation from law enforcement, which I think all of us think is good for everyone. We have a very different focus. We're often focused on the medical versus like the criminal. And so we have different perspectives, and it also provides counterbalances to each other. I will say that death investigation, just like crime scene investigation, just like being a volunteer fire person, has like dramatically changed in the previous decades, where it was, on the job to like certification to, much more structured and much more complex. And so our death investigators are all trained. As soon as they have enough cases or scenes that they've attended to, they become certified by the American Board of Medical Legal Death Investigation. And then we can real time, submit. We're looking at medical records real time from the scene. We're taking photos and uploading them. And so there's a lot of communication. So it's really become its own thing. It's not quite like in the Quincy days, which half the people probably don't even know anymore, but where, it was important to walk out to the scene, because like you're not going to get that information unless you're physically there looking at the body, because there's not going to be an image for you to see. Now law enforcement has 3D scanning, and they're doing amazing photography. And now, because it's digital versus film, where they used to worry about how much money you spent on developing your pictures. And so I think it's taken it to like professionalism to like quite a different level. And so they're really our extension is our death investigators. And that's why we have this sort of structured process where, we treat every scene basically the same way. We come in a very structured manner and go through our pretty routine process. So
Well, thank you very much for your work, and thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Well, it's good to
Thank
see
you.
you. And
Likewise.
Next year, would you like carrot cake?
Oh, that I'll eat. I love carrot cake.
All right. Well, no.
We'll invite you back.
All right. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right.
To the
Now we're
staff.
going to get to have an update on our community indicators. welcome.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Cascaden, Board of Commissioners. My name is Stacy Sunby. I am the Analysis Manager within our Policy Analysis and Communications Department. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing our two newest management analysts, Kathleen and Aranza behind me. They have been with the county since November of 2023. Early in on the job, one of their first tasks was to learn about our community indicators. What do the data say? Where are we getting the data sources? And ultimately updating the data for tonight's presentation. So tonight what you will hear are a variety of different data points, anything from demographic and socioeconomic characteristics that really shape the overall well-being of our county. I do want to mention that in the board packet, unfortunately, the presentation was not attached. We will get that out to the Board of Commissioners as soon as possible. And also, I believe it's Kathleen will mention that the full report will be published on our website tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to introduce Kathleen, and she's going to start the presentation. Thank you.
Welcome.
And thank you, Stacy. Madam Chair Cascaden, members of the board, my name is Kathleen Nath, and I'm a management analyst on the Policy Analysis and Communications team. Today, along with my teammate, Aranza Chari-Cub, we'll be presenting the Olmsted County Community Indicators for 2023. This is the third year that the Policy Analysis and Communications team has presented this data to the board and released this information to the public. However, this is typically done around January, and we are now into April. So for this year, we have decided to put the data that has recently been released into this presentation to allow you to have the most recent data that we are able to share. So what we'll notice on some of our slides tonight is that you'll have 2022 data alongside 2023. We'll mention this as the data comes up and as these slides are presented, but we wanted to let you know before the presentation began. The purpose of the Community Indicators Report is to provide a barometer of resident quality of life within Olmsted County, Minnesota. The data compares the county's measures to both the state and the nation, and this report is not intended to be an organizational performance report, but is instead meant to show the resident quality of life within our geographic area. There are several of our sources listed below, but the full list of references can be found at the end of our presentation. Community indicators are intended to support county leadership by providing data and information to support our mission, which is building a sustainable foundation for a safe, healthy, and welcoming community through public service excellence. This report is utilized by our organization, but also by many of our partners for many things, but just to mention a few, they include benchmarking, requesting and reporting on grants, and as you heard at the most recent board meeting, strategic planning efforts. Again, the full Community Indicators Report will be found on the external-facing website tomorrow. But for tonight, we'll be focusing on a shorter list of topics. For example, Section 13, which will be found on the full report, will not be covered tonight as the 2023 Community Indicators did not include an election year. Additionally, most of this data tonight comes from the American Community Survey, which releases it on a rolling schedule. And this data is most recently released from 2022. And as this data is now about a year and a half old, some of our more current events in the county, such as the Unbound expansion planned at Mayo Clinic, are not included in tonight's presentation, but they will be included in future releases from the ACS. To begin, we'll talk about overall demographics within Olmsted County. The county continues to grow with a 14% increase since the 2010 census. And for last year, we grew 0.5% in 2023, which puts us in about the top third of growing counties within the state of Minnesota. And to direct your attention to the map on the right-hand side of the page, you'll notice that in that kind of dark teal green color is the fastest growing counties in the state, which include Pine and Wright. And the fastest shrinking counties are those in that brown color, but the fastest two shrinking counties are Traverse and Lake of the Woods. We have a higher percentage of foreign-born residents than the state, and a slightly lower percentage of older population, which we list as 65 or older here, and veterans than the state and the nation. This is a change from last year, as the veteran population used to be higher than both the state and the nation in the last community indicators. We also wanted to take a moment to zoom out to the rest of the country to see on a county basis the fastest growing and fastest shrinking counties. And as you'll notice, it's the same color scale as you saw before. And generally speaking, the fastest growing region in the country tends to be that southeast portion of the country. And the fastest shrinking you'll see is more in that Midwest and Western regions. When you compare Olmsted County's age demographics to both the state and the nation, you'll notice that we trend pretty similarly over the percentage of age. But I did want to mention the one change between the previous community indicators and this year is the count of residents will be in that 35%, that bar listed in red on the left. The age group between 25 and 34 used to be the largest count, and they have now moved up to the 35 to 44-year-old age for this year, or for 2022, I should say. We wanted to take a moment to recognize that racial and ethnic diversity is only one measure that makes a county diverse, and that takes many different types to make a community. However, for this slide, we are focusing solely on racial and ethnic diversity. Olmsted County has grown its non-white population by 37% since the 2010 census. When we compare the 2023 percentage of population in that chart on the left-hand side to both the state and the nation, what you'll notice is that we typically trend pretty similarly to the state as far as racial and ethnic diversity goes. However, when we bring in the national averages, we do start to see some big differences. For example, our white alone and Asian alone populations are higher than the state and the nation. Conversely, our Black or African American alone and Hispanic or Latino alone are both smaller than the state and the nation. The Olmsted County data for 2023 is provided in the pie chart on the right, and it's the same percentages just put into pie chart form. 11% of Olmsted County residents were born in another country, and as of 2022, 44% of them have become naturalized U.S. citizens. 95% of Olmsted County residents in 2022 were U.S. citizens, which is slightly higher than the national average and slightly lower than the Minnesota average. When we take a look at the chart below, we are comparing 2010 to 2022 with a percent of those 11% residents where they're coming from as a geographic area. And again, we tend to trend pretty similarly to the state, especially when we compare the percentage that increased from the region of Africa. One of the differences between Olmsted County and Minnesota, though, is the Oceania region, where Minnesota is seeing a slight increase and Olmsted County is seeing a slight decrease over time. For our language and ancestry slide, you'll notice that we put the state of Minnesota on the left with the chart listed below, and the Olmsted County language and ancestry profile is listed on the right. For our languages used in Minnesota other than English, our top three are Spanish, Amharic, Somali, or other Afro-Asiatic languages, and Hmong. And while the census doesn't give us as detailed of a breakdown for the counties, they do give us our top language categories. So ours include, for 2022, Spanish, other Indo-European languages, and Asian Pacific Islander languages. And while we recognize that Rochester is one part of Olmsted County, they do release the count of languages that their students speak, and they are up to nearly 100 languages, which is an increase from 82 last year. Our Olmsted County ancestry profile is as follows. We are 31% German, 12.9% Norwegian, 11% Irish, 7% English, 4% Sub-Saharan African, and 37.4% unclassified, unreported, or other. My last slide tonight before I turn this presentation back to Aranza is on education trends. And what you'll notice here is that Olmsted County has a higher percentage of graduation rates than both the state and the nation. In this chart below, we are comparing high school graduation or higher and bachelor degrees or higher between 2019 and 2022. And when you look at Olmsted County overall, you'll notice that we are increasing. So for example, our high school graduation rates increased 1%, and our bachelor degree or higher increased 4%. And this is particularly commendable when you remember that this was during the global pandemic. When you break the data down by race, you do start to see some discrepancies. For example, at the high school or graduate or higher level, you'll notice that our Black students are receiving high school graduation or high school diplomas at about 10% decrease over time. But conversely, you'll see that there has been a significant increase in those from some other race. When we take a look at our bachelor's degree or higher, there it tends to stratify a little bit more by race and ethnic background. However, just to focus on those negatives, the decreases over time are the Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, 2 or more races, American Indian or Alaskan Native, and our Black students. However, I did want to remind the audience that we did have a 4% increase in that same time period, which again, is a wonderful feat for our school districts. Thank you very much for your time, and I will now present this data back to Lorenza.
May I ask a question?
Oh, absolutely.
On the bachelor's degree relative to Native Hawaiian and specific, it's appreciably low, I think. Yeah, 81 to 57%. That's, is there, are you aware of the reason?
So
just small numbers?
Manager Cascaden, Commissioner Senjum, I won't speak for Rochester or even for the public school districts. I don't have an incredible amount of data, but I do recognize that the Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander group is particularly small. So when you have 1 or 2 decide not to change it, it can make a substantial difference within the numbers.
Thank you. That's fine.
Of course. Thank you again.
Hello everyone, my name is Aransa Chaida Cobb, and I will be presenting the rest of these slides to you all. So my first slide is on individual income. And using Census Bureau's 5-year estimates, we found that Olmsted County's average individual income for 2022 was nearly $49,000. This is 8% higher than Minnesota's, which Minnesota had $45,000. As the chart here displays, there are disparities in race and ethnicity. By far, the individual income racial category group with the lowest individual income status was American Indian and Alaska Native, where on the contrary, white, alone non-Hispanic, was the highest. We also found median household income for Olmsted County, and Olmsted County was the highest between the county, the state, and the U.S. at $90,420. Individual income refers to the total earnings one reports to the IRS, not including income from any other person. Household income refers to income from the lead owner of a home, plus any earnings of other individuals in the household who contribute to the monthly household finances. For this next slide, we obtained data also from the Census Bureau's 5-year estimates. We found that 7.9% of Olmsted County's population live below the poverty line, and this is a line in red up here on this graph. 7.9% is lower than the national average of 11.5%. According to federal poverty guidelines, the poverty threshold for a family of 4 is nearly $30,000, while for one individual it's nearly $15,000. We found the largest age group to be living in poverty to be those between 18 and 34 years of age, with the next group over being those under 18. And these are very young individuals. We also find females to be the highest, to be among those in poverty status at nearly 9% for the sex categories. And we found Black or African Americans between all racial ethnic category groups to be the highest in poverty status. We'll continue on the subject of poverty. And on this slide, I will reiterate that nearly 8% of Olmsted County residents live below the poverty line. This is 4 times as much for Black or African Americans at nearly 32%, and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders, American Indian and Alaska Native, and some other race alone, all together make up the 4 largest groups that live within poverty. And we can see this as the 4 top groups standing in the beginning of the graph. Now we're going to focus these next 2 slides on health factors. Just as a reminder, Olmsted County joins with the Mayo Clinic and Olmsted County Medical Center to form our community's health need assessment data. And if there's any specific questions on the data itself or how the survey was handled out to the public, please do reach out to our coordinator, Derek Fritz, who works in the public health department. For this slide, we decided to share the most recent community health needs assessment data with our top 3 priorities for 2024 to 2026 being mental health, access to healthcare, and drug use. And this changed from our previous assessment that went from 2021 to 2023, which focused on financial stress, substance abuse, along with mental health. For our 2023 data, we found that nearly 1 in 3 of adults report having a mental health issue. And we found 1 in 3 of adults delay any type of healthcare access, as well as nearly 1 in 5 of adults report using any type of drug, which includes opioids, illicit drug use, marijuana, among others. And we learned from the medical examiner what illicit drug use means. Continuing on the subject of health, we also find that nearly 9.5% of Olmsted County's population have a disability, and this includes cognitive or physical. The county's rate did decrease slightly, though, from 2021, and both Minnesota and the United States have higher rates of those with a disability, both also increasing slightly from 2021. American Indian and Alaska Native is the racial group comprising of the largest percent of those with a disability, as we can see at the very top of the graph to the right. And then we found that some other races, the next group over, with whites and 1 in 10 with a disability for 2022 in Olmsted County. There are a variety of components that make up our housing and living, and we found the homeownership rate in Olmsted County to be nearly 70%. This is close to 3% lower than Minnesota, but close to 30% higher than the United States. The homeownership rate itself is the proportion of households that are owner-occupied. This is calculated by dividing the number of owner-occupied households by the total number of occupied housing units. White non-Hispanic was the largest share of renters and homeowners in 2020, and 2020 ended up being the most recent data we could have for this. And Black or African Americans were the largest share of renters and the smallest share of homeowners, with American Indian and Alaska Native being the next for the smallest share of homeowners. And no information existed for a couple of groups, unfortunately, as we can see on the graph to the left. The average persons per household for Olmsted County in Minnesota is 2.61, and for the United States, it is 2.67. The median home value for Olmsted County reached nearly $286,000, while for Minnesota is nearly $287,000, dropping slightly for the United States at nearly $282,000. There's a pattern here of similarity we see between Olmsted County and Minnesota, with a differentiation once you include the United States. And we can continue to see this for median gross monthly rent, households heating fuel or utility gas use, and households without a broadband internet connection. We do see, although, that the United States holds less amount of individuals who use households heating fuel as a source, and a higher group of individuals without a broadband internet connection. And we can see this in the percents on this table here. This next slide shows labor force. We received this information from the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, and specifically those who are 16 and over and engaged in the workforce are included here. Engagement typically refers to an employee's job satisfaction, loyalty, and inclination to expend effort towards organizational goals. Olmsted County had a higher labor force participation rate than Minnesota and the nation, around 70%, as we can see in the hexagons to the left. 12% of employees worked from home in Olmsted County as compared to 17% in Minnesota and 15% in the nation, as we have here at the top. And Olmsted County also hires a higher number of employees with any disability when compared to Minnesota. The labor force participation rate in Olmsted County show that in general, across cultural groups, the labor participation rate is steady, with the American Indian and Alaska Native group alone being the outlier or the lowest group with participants at nearly 32%. And we can see this on the graph here all the way to the right. This next slide has information for unemployment rate. I want to share that simply being out of work isn't enough for a person to be counted as unemployed. He or she or they also has to be available to work and actively looking for work or on temporary layoff. The employment rate, on the other hand, as I previously mentioned, measures the number of people who have a job as a percentage of the working age population. In any given month, the unemployment rate can rise or fall. For our unemployment rate slide with data from 2022, Olmsted County averaged an overall unemployment rate higher than the state. The graph displays American Indian and Alaska Native group alone are the first in Olmsted County for overall unemployment rates, but we're missing data from Minnesota as it was not published at the time. And Black African American are the second, and we can see these two groups at the beginning of the graph here. Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander group, as well as whites, were the two groups with the lowest unemployment rates, and we can see these two groups all the way to the right. Overall, since 2021, for all the county, the state, and the United States, the unemployment rates do tend to be decreasing. This next slide is about our community safety. The table shows the 3-year data of crime reported in Olmsted County and the city of Rochester. The data is collected from the FBI Information Services Division, and the county's data does not overlap with the city of Rochester's data. An incident is a report, and through FBI's national-based incident-based reporting system, law enforcement agencies may report up to 10 offenses within any incident or report. We saw that the location type for crimes was highest for both Olmsted County and the city of Rochester at residence home, and this is followed by highway, alley, street, or sidewalk. The type of crime that was highest at the county and for the city of Rochester was property crime at the very top of the table, followed by larceny theft. Examples are thefts of bicycles, thefts of motor vehicle parts and accessories, shoplifting, pocket picking, or the stealing of any property or article that's not taken by force, violence, or by fraud. And burglary is the next highest. Overall, most of the crime trends are dropping between 2020 and 2022, and we can see this here in the spark lines. And there's a variety of factors that impact our environment. We have air and water quality to share with you all today. We have 2 different years and a variety of data sources as well. We found that the average time to get to work is much shorter for the county than the state and the United States. We average nearly 17 minutes. Olmsted County also experiences cleaner air when compared to the state in 2022. We found that 87% of air quality days are considered good in Olmsted County. We also found that 44% of homes tested for radon were above the health action limit. I'll express that good air quality is between 0 and 50. At this point, air quality is considered satisfactory, and air pollution poses little or no risk. Moderate air quality is between 51 and 100. At this point here, air quality is acceptable. However, some pollutants may be a cause for health concern for a very small number of people. Over 100, air quality is unhealthy, at first for certain sensitive groups, and then for everyone as air quality index values continue to get higher. For our private well water quality in Olmsted County for 2023, we found that 9% of well owners tested their water, 15% were positive for bacteria, 35% are impacted by nitrates, 3% have nitrates above 10 parts per million, and 18% tested above detection levels for arsenic, as well as 16% tested above 50 parts per billion for manganese. In 2021, we were at 19% for positive for bacteria. Impacted by nitrates means that it's over 3 parts per million, or 3 parts per million itself. Nitrates above 10 parts, nitrates over 10 parts per million is where our biggest concerns lie for nitrates itself. And then the detection level for arsenic is 2 micrograms per liter or over. We also found that approximately 9,000 households are served by private wells. This suggests that 20% of our population gets their drinking water from a private well. We also found that private wells are shared by 3 to 4 homes, and 54% of Olmsted County private wells are of unknown construction or constructed prior to the 1974 Minnesota State Well Code. To finish our presentation, I'll share that we are the 7th largest populated county in Minnesota. This is up from the 2010 census where we were the 8th largest, and now it is Stearns County. Once again, this is not new information. We positively did surpass the state and the nation in many major indicators, and this includes having a higher percentage of adults with bachelor's degrees or higher, having a higher mean individual income for certain groups, higher number of employees with any disability, more days with healthy air quality, and lower poverty rates overall. However, when we compare our county to Minnesota and the nation, and when we break down the data by race, ethnicity, sex, and age, we do see disparities here. And this includes unemployment and poverty rates are higher for non-whites. Mean individual income and labor force participation rates are lower for American Indian and Alaska Native groups, as well as Asian and some other race. The home ownership rate is lower for non-whites, and disabilities are higher for American Indian and Alaska Native group. In closing, to remind friends, staff, and all board members here, the data may be used when planning for programs and services or projects, applying for grants, planning for a strategic strategy for department teams, and in strategic planning efforts. The full report, again, will be found tomorrow on the county's website. And thank you for dedicating the time today to these important topics. We hope this proves beneficial to you all and are here to help answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Questions from members? Commissioner Wright?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I noticed in the category of crime that it was down in almost every category except one, and then that one robbery was up by one. And I know that you don't. Yeah, there we go. Yep. Yeah. So I know that you don't have on here measuring people's perception, but the data is that the crime is down. But we still hear that people think that they feel unsafe.
Right.
So do you have a measure for that?
Of why people feel unsafe themselves?
Yeah,
Or?
and is that measure going up or is it going down?
Yeah.
And why, what's the relationship between the actual numbers and the feeling? Thank you.
Yeah, no, of course, I won't speak specifically to the FBI criminal justice information here, but from my experiences and working for a different county and the state departments, I do know that that is dependent on specific groups. It's specific to zip code. It is specific to people's personal experiences and mental health. That's where I've gotten more information, where it relates more to a lot of other previous data. But I see Stacey's coming up here, and maybe she can describe more about the spark lines here.
Madam Chair, Cascada, and Commissioner Wright.
Thank you.
I would like to also mention that every 3 years, as Aranza had mentioned, we do our community health needs assessment. During that, we do a community survey. One of many different questions are kind of the safe from fear and violence. This is community safety. This is I feel safe in my neighborhood. Additionally, we have a residential survey that is also done every 3 years. We will be administering the CHNA survey, I believe this year. Is that right, Travis? I think it's this year, the residential survey next year. So we will have updated figures for those as well. But I would like to confirm that yes, unfortunately, if the data shows the crime is going down, perception still remains high, that individuals feel unsafe in our community. We can get the specific numbers and data from both of those recent surveys to you by the end of this week too.
Well, yeah, I know they do feel that way. My question is that why is there this disparity when here's the actual fact? And maybe that's something that we should work on because it's quality of life is that perception that things are pretty good.
Perception and data do not equal.
Yeah. Thank you.
Very good.
Any other questions? Commissioner Tyne?
I don't really have a question, but I recall when I was in college that I really had a tough time with stats class, and if my teachers were nearly as expressive and cheerful as you two are, I really wouldn't like the class, so thank you.
Thank you.
Quick question, just to verify, when you report unemployment data, it's people who are in the workforce, right?
And
so we're
permanent
not
resident.
looking at people who are out of the workforce.
Correct, yep, because
Okay,
those
so
employed are
it's-
16 and over and engaged in the workforce.
But I
Correct.
think we also have a higher workforce participation rate in Minnesota and in our county than many other places
Yes,
as well.
correct, yeah. We
And
found
then
that,
do we
yeah.
also need to be aware, like when we look at some of the data on Native Hawaiians and certain groups, there's really very small numbers.
Right,
So
yep.
the percentage looks, you know, then it looks.
100%.
It skews the
For the
perception,
small
right?
groups, right, to take that in mind
Yeah,
is important.
so 11% of American Indian and Native Americans, but there may be only, I don't know, 100 in the community. So, okay.
Yeah.
Just think of the pressure, though, if you're a Pacific Islander, that you have to graduate high school and you have to be employed because those both 100%.
Because otherwise, that's right.
You throw it way off.
Yep.
Well, you know, I think having, it looks like Commissioner Sinja wants to ask a question, but just observing that having this capacity that we now have with all of you to put together our community indicators is really very helpful on all sorts of levels, answering questions for people, pointing them to what the data really shows.
Right.
For those not-for-profit organizations that are trying to write a grant proposal, for instance, to be able to have a ready resource of information about our community and probably our own staff as well, is really helpful. So thanks
you, Madam
to the
Chair
good work for
Cascaden. Thank
the
you.
PAC unit is doing and putting this, putting not just our perceptions, or which, as Commissioner Wright points out, can also be misperceptions, backed up with actual data. Commissioner Senjum, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this. I'll be honest, going into this report, I was wondering, oh my gosh, what's this all about? But it's fascinating and it's great data. But I do have one question, and I'm almost, I just have to understand it. But
Sure.
one of your access to health care, it says 32% of adults report delaying any type of access to health care. What does that really mean? Is that you can't get your appointment when you want it, or you don't get an appointment at all?
Yeah, so I know this information is in one of the surveys when I spoke to Derek Fritz, who is the coordinator of all this information and the survey data. And I remember specifically talking to him that it did include things like dentist appointment. It did include mental health counselor, mental health, like a psychologist. It included a variety of access to any well-being. I'd be curious to see if that changed throughout the years, because I know he continuously updates the survey with a couple of other people. So based on what I know, and I know Stacy's worked in the public health department with a survey, so Stacy, please.
And to follow up with that too, there is a specific question, like Aranza said, the type of medical care that people are delaying, but then the reason. The reason is anything from I did not have childcare, I did not have transportation, I did not have insurance. So it's any type of reason that an individual may be delaying mental health, dentist, dental care, or medical care.
So we routinely hear that we do not have enough mental health providers in our community. We had our own challenge in getting psychiatric services. Across the state, we hear about that. We also hear that if you don't have a provider who speaks your language, you will delay care. And we also hear that if you don't have coverage, although we're really good in Minnesota now in terms of health insurance coverage, but dental care is, there are very few dentists who will take medical assistance patients, for instance. So that becomes a barrier for people to have access to dental care. So it can be a whole variety of things in addition to, as you said, transportation, childcare, a whole bunch of things can get in there.
I would just, this is really an important question, because literally we're saying a third of Olmsted County, and I don't know what delaying means. If you never get it, or if it's delayed 2 weeks or 3 months or whatever, and we all face that. But what this really means is really important, and especially in a place where there's more physicians per capita than any place in the world.
And it's important to know that it is self-reported. So it's the Community Health Needs Assessment Survey. So it is not data getting from a medical appointment that it was delayed. It's self-reported with those lists of kind of barriers. I think it's also to note that one of our CHIP, or the community health priorities, is access to health care. I believe it was earlier this year the Board of Commissioners received an update from Denise Daniels, the Director of Public Health, on having an action item to address that. That is something that we can point you to the current CHIP plan as well to see
Well,
specifically what.
Can I just ask a yes or no? Do you think this means that literally a third of the people in Olmsted County can't get health care here?
I don't think
Yes
it's
or no?
that they can't. It's, again, is
Okay.
it costing too much because I'm going to the dentist and they're requiring me to pay upfront versus bill me? Is it I don't have transportation to get there? So I think
Okay.
it's understanding a little bit more about what those true barriers are. And that's where I can definitely follow up with our CHIP to specifically
It just seems like a
see.
high number. Thank you very much. I don't-
Yeah. I'll give you another example, Commissioner. The UCare program serves many, many adults who are on Medicare. There's only one dental provider in Olmsted County that will accept UCare for payment.
Right.
So there's those kinds of things that are barriers as well. So it doesn't literally mean that there isn't health care available. It's that I delay accessing it. So other.
Madam Chair? For that presentation, could you go back to the radon slide?
Of course.
And I echo Commissioner Tynes' remarks that I can't remember paying closer attention to such a data-rich presentation maybe ever. So it was very interesting and accessible. So this statistic here of 44% of homes tested for radon were above the health action limit. Does that mean requiring further attention?
Correct. We want that number to drop. We don't want homes to have a positive test for radon.
So 44% is positive, requiring further attention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
You know, an observation I'd make, and sort of combining the medical examiner's report and your report, is that, and with Bijbianiak and the sheriff here, we've had fewer accidents and fewer deaths. So our Towards Zero Death public health engineering initiative has brought results. I mean, we sometimes lose track of seeing where, you know, we've talked about these initiatives and education and so on, but there's a very concrete data that shows that number of injuries are down through action of two of our, and you wouldn't necessarily think of highway engineers and sheriff's departments combining to reduce deaths, but that's what's happened, right? So, yeah.
Thank you.
Other observations, questions for our world-class PAC team?
One quick question on that same slide that lists nitrates, bacteria, et cetera. Does the full report tell us how many samples were taken? Because there's no N on this slide. I don't know what 3% of how many samples.
Right. Those samples are, I remember specifically with a person she's an environmental heavy, well-known specialist, but she works, I think, in the public health department. When I spoke to her, she's trying to gather all the samples, all the data in one specific area. So she helped me find this information, but from several in different areas. So she's going to try to combine as much information as she can, plus those samples in one specific area so it can be accessible to everyone. Her name is Lori. I forgot her last name.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we could probably follow up and get that number, the N, as it were. That sounds like a follow-up point that our correct team could get on.
Yes,
Very timely given everything going on with our nitrate focus. Right?
Yep.
So, all right. Other questions, observations from staff? Well, again, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Did you not introduce one member of your team here, did you?
Are you speaking about this man right here?
Yes.
He is my husband.
Good job, didn't she? Yes.
For support.
He is definitely on your team.
Yeah, he is. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We're going to move now to the board and committee reports, and we're going to start with the Rochester Library report from Commissioner Podolsky-Smith.
All right, I've got two reports, one from the library and one from public health. Okay, so this is a big week for the library. It's Library Week, and they held a fundraiser, and many members of the Rochester Public Library Board and staff took part in a social media fundraiser called Ready, Set, Library. And the campaign had a lot of engagement and enthusiasm. I'm not sure about the final tally, but several thousand, at least several thousand, had been raised when I last checked. And the library youth services team offered a number of wildly popular activities during the spring break, which led to the library's highest week of visits since the pandemic. And one more library report, there's an RFP for a library use study. And I'm just going to get my facts straight here. So the library is facing a conundrum that they wish to solve. The number of Rochester Public Library card holders has dropped 19% since 1995, while the city's population has grown by 52%. And this means that fewer card holders are using more library resources, with circulation materials nearly doubling since that time. So according to a recent survey, a third of Rochester households have library cards, but that percentage increases per census tract according to household income. So the library is putting out an RFP for facilities and operations to study this trend to work toward future equity in library card holdership, is that a word? And usership. The study could cost as much as $240,000. The plan calls for a consultant to be named on July 17th and work starting in August. The final recommendations on the library master plan will be ready by April 10th, 2025. Okay, and public health. Commissioner Wright and I were presented with this very interesting update or report about a manufactured home park collaborative. And this was an update from an Olmsted County environmental health specialist. Oak Terrace and Parkside manufactured home parks addressing numerous risks and hazards and crime concerns. And the intention was to create a safe, accessible, and supportive community by reducing crime, maintaining a safe environment, opportunities for children and families, and creating healthy living choices. And this was really one of the most impressive parts about this update is how many stakeholders were brought together to solve these ongoing problems, including Olmsted County, the City of Rochester, the public school system, including students at risk and other community liaisons. So ultimately, this collaborative made it possible for multiple agencies to work together to improve the lives of residents at Oak Terrace and Parkside by working collectively to address problems and find creative ways to solve them. And it was one of the ways that that Olmsted County, in partnership with other agencies here, is so successful at solving problems, but the larger community might not know it. It's these little, like, behind the scenes initiatives that have so much impact but can go unnoticed. Yep.
I think our public health department and many of our agencies do a great job in partnering quietly with others to have greater impact, and it's a good example. Commissioner Wright.
Yeah, parks, yeah. It was very nice to hear from the Oxbow friends tonight, $1 million. I think that Commissioner Senjum said it the best. It's just unbelievable that we could get $1 million in a community like this. But the parks move forward. We have a very good park superintendent and a very good board. So Carlin has submitted a grant for $2.5 million for Lake Zumbro Park, and that was submitted to the Legislative Citizens Commission on Minnesota Resources. So hopefully, I think there was, several hundred million available in there. Maybe we'll get lucky and get some. It's a very good plan that she's submitted. The final design for the Oxbow campground is done, and we did finally get released from the state historical Society so that we can start on the construction of the campground. And they will do that this spring yet. And then the design for the Chesterwood Visitor Center is going to be completed soon. And that will be our next legacy grant proposal that we will submit, is for the Chesterwood Visitor Center. And that will also probably be at the same location as the trailhead for the bicycle trail and walking path that's also going to be constructed along with DNR. And the pathway through the park is already known, so that will get some more visitors as well. And I just also wanted to mention that there is still some people that think that there is a $25 fee to visit Chesterwood, which is not true. All right. Well, the board eliminated that 2, maybe 3 years ago. So those people that are listening, it is free. Walk in the woods, hear the birds, look at nature. It's a great place to visit in Olmsted County for free.
Thank you. Are there other committee reports members would like to make? Well, I have a little video I would like to show you. It's not news to any of the board members, but our staff put this video together, and I just thought you should see the quality of work that they do, and I'd like to have it on the record as well. It's been an incredible journey to serve on the Olmsted County Board for the last 12 years. It's been a wonderful chapter in my long career of public service here in Olmsted County, and I want to thank you for having that opportunity. I had actually planned to retire in 2022, but then redistricting happened, and we discovered that 6 of the 7 commissioners were going to be on the ballot. 4 of my colleagues immediately announced that they were retiring, and their decision affected mine. I decided that it would be really hard to have so many new commissioners all at once, and that I should stay on for a little bit longer to help with the transition. Well, the transition period is over. Those 4 new commissioners have been seamlessly integrated into the county board, and now it's time for me to step aside. So I'm announcing today that I will be resigning my position at the end of 2024. Why am I announcing now? Well, because if I announce now, the Olmsted County Board can schedule a special election for District 6 that coincides entirely with this year's election cycle. The candidates for the position will have the same filing period, primary, and general election schedule as all other candidates, and they'll take office in January 2025 with everyone else who was elected this year. Let me close by thanking you for the honor and privilege of representing you in this position and others over the years. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it truly is an honor to have the opportunity to represent our community and make the contributions that elected officials can make. I leave this office with gratitude and appreciation, especially for the trust and support you've given me over the years. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So at your May 7th meeting, you'll have the opportunity to pass a board resolution that will do that of scheduling the special election to be concurrent with this year's election cycle. And I do know that there are people who are planning to run, so I'm sure they're going to appreciate the fact if you choose to do it that way, it will avoid the cost of a special election and have good voter turnout as well. So that is the plan. And with that in mind, I'm sure you're going to accept my resignation. You really don't have a choice. I thought I'd close with a quote that seemed to be really fit for today, and it's from the Bible, and it's simply this: to everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven. And it's been wonderful to be part of this body and to be part of this body for another 8 months or so. And with that, I'm going to declare us